It was a dreary Tuesday evening, the kind of night where the rain pounded relentlessly against the windows and the wind howled like a ghost through the streets. Inside the warm glow of Sarah's diner, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon offered a welcome reprieve from the storm outside. Sarah, the diner's owner, leaned wearily against the counter, her apron stained from a long day of serving the handful of regulars who still frequented her establishment. Business hadn't been good lately. More chain restaurants had popped up in the area, drawing away her once loyal customers. Bills were piling up, and despite her relentless effort, the small diner she had poured her heart into seemed to be slipping through her fingers. Still, she carried on, fueled by a sense of responsibility and her unwavering belief in treating people with kindness. As Sarah wiped down the counter, the small bell above the door jingled softly, signaling a late-night visitor. She glanced up and saw him, a thin, ragged man, his frame barely filling the oversized coat draped around his shoulders. His face was gaunt, his hollow cheeks and sunken eyes telling a story of long days without food or rest. The rain had drenched him to the bone, and he stood hesitantly near the entrance, as though unsure if he was even welcome. The sight tugged at Sarah's heart. She had seen hard times herself, and recognized the look of someone at the end of their rope. "Come on in, out of the rain," Sarah called out with a warm smile, her voice cutting through the sound of the storm. The man shuffled in, careful not to drip too much water onto the worn linoleum floor. He sat at a corner booth, his movements slow and deliberate, as if each step required effort. Sarah noticed the way his eyes darted to the menu on the wall, then to his hands, which clutched an old wallet as though he were debating whether to stay or leave. When she approached his table, Sarah saw his lips tremble as he mumbled an apology. "I don't have enough money for a meal," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if you've got dishes that need washing or floors that need mopping, I'll work for a plate of food." His words were humble, but they carried the weight of desperation, and Sarah's heart broke a little at the thought of what this man must have endured to reach this point. Without a second thought, she shook her head and said, "You don't have to work for food here. Sit tight. I'll bring you something warm." The man's wide, disbelieving eyes met hers, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected: hope. She turned back to the kitchen, her mind already racing about what to serve him. It wasn't much, just a bowl of her homemade chicken noodle soup, a crusty piece of bread fresh from the oven, and a slice of apple pie. But she made sure it was plated with care. When she placed the food in front of him, the man looked at her as though she had handed him a treasure. He murmured a quiet, "Thank you," before picking up his spoon and taking the first bite. Sarah returned to her station behind the counter, watching discreetly as the man ate. His movements were slow and deliberate, savoring every morsel as though it were the first meal he'd had in days, which she suspected it was. As the minutes passed, she found herself wondering about his story. Who was he? How had he ended up like this? What kind of life had he lived before the streets became his home? Eventually, as the diner emptied and the evening grew quieter, Sarah ventured back to his table to chat. "What's her name?" she asked. "Jack," he replied after a moment's hesitation. He didn't offer much more at first, but as they talked, he began to open up. He spoke of a life that once held promise, how he had been an architect, designing homes and buildings that people marveled at. But a series of misfortunes had stripped everything away. A financial scam had drained his savings, leaving him bankrupt. His wife, unable to handle the stress of their plummeting circumstances, had left. Without a home, without a job, Jack had drifted from town to town, surviving on odd jobs and the occasional kindness of strangers. As Sarah listened, her heart ached for him. Despite all he had been through, there was no bitterness in Jack's voice. Instead, there was a quiet resilience, a determination to keep moving forward, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. By the time he finished his meal, Sarah felt a strange sense of connection to this man she had only just met. When Jack stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and produced a crumpled bill, insisting she take it as payment. "It's not much," he said, "but I want to pay for what you gave me." Sarah refused, shaking her head. "This one's on the house," she said firmly. Jack looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. something between gratitude and sorrow. "I won't forget this," he said softly. "One day, I'll repay you." After Jack left, Sarah began clearing the table, her thoughts still lingering on their conversation. That was when she noticed it, a folded piece of paper tucked neatly under the edge of the plate. She unfolded it, her curiosity piqued, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw written inside. The words on that paper were the first step in a chain of events that would forever change Sarah's life. When Sarah unfolded the piece of paper Jack had left behind, she initially thought it might be a thank you note or perhaps a few scribbled words of gratitude. Instead, she found something far more surprising, a detailed sketch of her diner, rendered with remarkable precision and artistry. The paper also included handwritten notes outlining ideas for renovations, improvements to the diner's layout, and suggestions for maximizing its small space. At the bottom, Jack had written, "Thank you for your kindness. You've given me more than a meal. You've reminded me what it feels like to matter. This is all I can offer now, but I hope it helps." Sarah stared at the sketch, her hands trembling. The intricate lines and careful thought behind the design revealed Jack's incredible talent as an architect. It was clear that even in his darkest moments, he hadn't lost his passion for creating something meaningful. She couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: admiration for his skill, sadness for his situation, and a spark of hope for what this could mean for her struggling diner. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could these ideas work? Could this be the solution she had been searching for to save her business? Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Jack's sketch. She spent hours poring over the notes, imagining how the diner might look if she implemented his ideas. The plans were brilliant, simple yet effective changes that would modernize the space while retaining its cozy charm. For example, Jack suggested rearranging the seating to create a more open, welcoming atmosphere and incorporating a small counter for coffee-to-go orders to attract commuters. He even included a concept for a signature feature, a skylight above the main dining area that would flood the space with natural light during the day, creating a warm and inviting environment. Encouraged by the potential in his designs, Sarah decided to take a leap of faith. She reached out to a few local contractors to get estimates for the renovations, using the last of her savings as a starting point. But even as she moved forward with Jack's plans, she couldn't shake the thought of him, where he was now, and whether he'd found a way to get back on his feet. She felt compelled to find him, not just to thank him, but to see if she could help him in some way. One evening, as the renovations began and her diner was temporarily closed, Sarah visited the local shelters and soup kitchens, asking if anyone had seen a man fitting Jack's description. For days, she had no luck, but her persistence finally paid off when a volunteer at a nearby shelter recognized him. "He's been staying here the past few nights," the woman said. Sarah's heart swelled with relief, and she asked if she could speak to him. When Sarah found Jack, he seemed surprised to see her. His expression shifted from shock to embarrassment, as though he felt ashamed of his circumstances. But Sarah wasted no time in explaining why she had come. She showed him the sketch and told him about her decision to use his designs for the diner's renovation. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "What you left for me, it's not just a sketch. It's a lifeline. You've given me hope." Jack's eyes glistened as he listened, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to smile. He admitted that leaving the sketch had been his way of trying to repay her kindness, though he never expected her to act on it. Sarah, however, wasn't finished. She offered him something more, a chance to work together. "I want you to be part of this," she said. "If you're willing, I could use your help overseeing the renovations. And once the diner is up and running again, I'll need someone with vision to help me keep it fresh." Jack hesitated. He was touched by her offer, but couldn't help but doubt himself. After all, he had been out of the professional world for so long. But Sarah was insistent. "You're talented, Jack. More than that, you're resilient. And I believe in you, just like you believed in me when you left me this sketch." Her words finally broke through his uncertainty, and Jack agreed to take the opportunity. The next few weeks were transformative for both of them. Jack threw himself into the project, working closely with contractors to bring his vision to life. He regained a sense of purpose and began to rediscover the confidence he had lost during his years of struggle. For Sarah, the collaboration became a source of inspiration. Seeing Jack's passion reignited reminded her of why she had opened the diner in the first place, to create a space where people felt cared for and seen. When the renovations were complete, the diner was almost unrecognizable. The new layout was airy and bright, with modern touches that still honored its classic roots. The skylight Jack had envisioned became the centerpiece, and Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how the space seemed to radiate warmth and energy. On the day of the grand reopening, Sarah invited Jack to be her guest of honor. Though he tried to decline, she insisted, saying that the diner's transformation was as much his story as hers. The day of the diner's grand reopening dawned bright and crisp, as though the world itself was celebrating the fresh start. Sarah stood outside her newly renovated diner, the sign above the door now gleaming with a fresh coat of paint. She felt a nervous excitement bubbling inside her as a small crowd began to gather. Locals who had watched her struggle over the years came to show their support, along with curious newcomers drawn by the buzz surrounding the reopening. Amid the crowd, Jack stood quietly, his modest demeanor unchanged despite the pivotal role he had played in the transformation. When the doors opened, people streamed inside, their faces lighting up as they took in the new design. The skylight cast a warm, golden glow across the space, and the fresh arrangement of tables made the diner feel open and inviting. The addition of the coffee counter was an instant hit, with commuters eagerly ordering their drinks as they admired the cozy yet modern aesthetic. Sarah had never seen her diner so full of life, and she could hardly believe the positive reactions from the community. Jack, at first reluctant to stay in the spotlight, found himself being drawn into conversations as patrons learned about his role in the renovation. Though shy at first, he began to share his story in small pieces, and the crowd listened with admiration. Sarah, watching from behind the counter, couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, not just for her diner, but for the man who had taken a chance on himself and on her. But the real surprise of the day came when a sharply dressed man approached Jack during the bustling celebration. The man introduced himself as a developer who specialized in urban revitalization projects. He had been passing through town and stopped by the diner after hearing about its unique renovation. As he admired the space, he became curious about the architect behind the design. When Jack humbly explained his background, the developer's interest only grew. "This is exceptional work," the man said, gesturing around the diner. "I've been looking for someone with fresh ideas and a keen sense of space for an upcoming project. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss a potential collaboration." Jack was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't find the words to respond, but Sarah stepped in, her smile as bright as the sunlight pouring through the skylight. "He's more than open," she said confidently. "This is his chance." That moment became the turning point in Jack's life. Over the following weeks, he met with the developer and was offered a contract to work on a series of community-focused projects. His designs would go on to help transform other struggling businesses and neglected spaces into thriving hubs of activity, earning him a reputation as a visionary with a gift for creating spaces that brought people together. For Sarah, the reopening marked the beginning of a new chapter. The diner flourished, drawing customers not just from the local area, but also from neighboring towns, all curious to experience the magic of the Kindness Diner they had heard about. The story of Sarah's generosity and Jack's redemption spread like wildfire, turning the diner into a symbol of hope and second chances. Despite his newfound success, Jack remained a regular presence at the diner, often coming by for coffee and a chat with Sarah. Their bond, forged in a moment of need, became a lifelong friendship that neither of them had expected. Together, they became a source of inspiration to others, proving that even a small act of kindness could ripple outward and create profound change. As months turned into years, Sarah never forgot the simple yet extraordinary decision she had made that rainy evening, to let a starving man eat for free. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time, but it had set off a chain of events that transformed not just her diner, but her life and the lives of countless others. And Jack, once a man who had lost everything, found himself not just back on his feet, but thriving. All because one woman had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself.